So if you're neurotic like me, you may have your own way of tracking your reading and your books that is irrespective of any sort of like online platform, whether that's Goodreads, Storygraph, Fable, whatever it is. And although all of those platforms have their perks, they have built-in metadata and can just draw stuff from the internet. For me as a book reviewer and a booktuber, I find that I really want to track so many other things and elements to these books and to these authors that you can't really get on one of these like public platforms. So a few years ago, I did this video where I talked about my Notion setup and how I track my reading. And in that video, I made a really simple Notion reading tracker that allowed me to like track the books that I was reading, when I read them, and my star ratings. And that was honestly it. There wasn't much other information. And that Notion template is still available and it's still for free, so you can grab it whenever you want. It's in the description of that video and also in this one. Now you may have seen my previous video where I scanned all of the books in my physical collection, and I used a old school library scanner to scan the barcodes and import the books into a library cataloging system, which I then later exported into Notion. Go to that video to get all my tips on how not to screw up doing this whole process. And the people in the comments also have some really great tips as well. You don't actually need a library scanner to do any of this. It was just nice and fun, and I liked the sound. As I was filming that video and editing it, I realized that I wanted to make my Notion tracker a lot more robust. I feel like there were so many other things that I wanted to track. And so in the process of creating that video, I ended up creating a much bigger, better, and just more powerful version of my Notion book tracker. And that is what I am calling the ultimate book tracker. And in today's video, I'm going to be walking you through that book tracker, but also 4 other databases that I've put in one single page that you can actually find on my Etsy shop. So there's a whole listing here. It's called the Ultimate Personal Library Database. It's a Notion template. You need to have Notion to make it work. And if you purchase this from my Etsy shop, then you'll get an immediate PDF download, which has the link to the Notion template, which you can then duplicate into your own Notion setup and start customizing for your own needs. Before I jump into the whole database and how it works, you don't need to buy this from me. This is just if you want to save yourself a bunch of time from building your own book tracker, then you can grab it here from my Etsy shop and you can support me and my channel through that. And also the other value add of getting this personal library database from me is that it comes preloaded with 500 plus books that have either been on my TBR, been in my physical collection, are books that I've actually read, and are books that I would recommend to you. So this way you don't have to start your TBR from scratch and you get a bunch of recommendations from me. I've also got other templates on my Etsy shop as well, so you can go check those out. And if you do buy 2 or more items, you can use the code STORY20 to get 20% off your whole order. Alrighty, let's jump into the actual Notion template and I'll take you through everything. I'll give you some tips on how to use it and customize it for yourself, and I'll explain all of the different views. There are 35 preset views for the book tracker. There are 96 properties within each book page, and there are 5 databases within this main page, the personal library database. So I'll give you the whole down low on all of that. So starting at this main page, the Ultimate Personal Library Database, if you did purchase the book tracker prior to this video going up, please just message me on Etsy and I will email you the new PDF with this new template. There's only like a few of you and you can just reduplicate the database, or you can just stick with the version that I had sold before. So starting at the top, we have a lovely little link to my Etsy shop, which you can toggle to hide, or you can just delete this whole block. Next, we have the little toggle for the walkthrough video. I'm gonna put the link to this video in here so that you all have it and it's ready to go. And if ever you need some clarification on a property or how something works, you can just refer back to this video and I will chapter the whole video so that you can just jump to the sections that you need. So after that, we have the table of contents and then the little summary of all of the databases that are within this personal library database. So the table of contents will take you to the different parts of this page of the personal library database page, and I'll go through them in a second. Over here, these actually link to the databases on their own. So there's a difference between the databases on their own versus what's in line on this page. One thing you'll notice is that when you embed a database into another page, then you can actually like change the fonts to be like different. You can do mono, you can do serif, you can do default. So I really like the serif because it feels very bookish. But if you go to the actual database page itself, you can't switch the fonts. It's just like the normal font. With that said, let's go through this main page first, and then I'll take you into each database. Okay, so let's start with the Ultimate Book Tracker. So this is your main database. This is the one that powers basically this whole thing. it is the main thing that you need. The Ultimate Book Tracker has 35 preset views, which are these little tabs up here. And then each book page, which is each entry in the book tracker, has 96 properties that you can update and change and fill out. And I will take you through all of those. So after the Ultimate Book Tracker, which essentially catalogs like all of the books in your library, so not necessarily just the books that you own, but also the books that are on your TBR, the books that are upcoming releases that you're excited for, really any kind of book within your mind and vicinity that you want to check out at some point, or something that you've read before, like all of that will be tracked within this book tracker. So after that, we have the author database. This is the database that feeds into the book tracker and allows you to have a separate page for each author where you can track specific details about them and other things. Originally, when I built the book tracker, I did have the authors as like just drop down options, but later I realized there were so many like properties that I wanted to track about the authors themselves that I didn't want to keep repeating that on each page. So I decided to just create author pages themselves and connect it to the book tracker database. After that, we have the quote tracker database. This is something new for me and something I'm so excited for. It's just so nice and aesthetic and like is a perfect way to track all of your favorite quotes or just any quotes that you come across. And this database is also synced with the book tracker database and also the author database so that you can attribute each quote to the right book and author. After that, I have two databases that are kind of optional. You can, live without them. You can do everything in the book tracker without these. However, I think they're kind of nice and they go above and beyond just the regular tracking and really helps challenge you in terms of your reading. So the fourth database that I have here is the reading goals tracker, and this is just essentially where you can track your different goals for the year, for the month, for the week, whatever you want. And the nice thing about this reading goals tracker is that it is synced with your book tracker database, so you can actually tag in the books that apply to each goal that you have. I'll go through that in specific in just a sec, but the last database that I have here is the daily pages read log, which is again optional, but it does sync with the book tracker database, and it allows you to essentially track how many pages you're reading each day and strive towards a goal of around 100 pages read each day. That is a lot. You can also edit that if you wanted to, and I can show you how to do that. So that said, let's go through each database in detail, and I will timestamp everything so that you can just jump to the database that you want to learn more about. And I'll also go through the properties that you can track for each book and author. Alrighty folks, buckle in. So for the Ultimate Book Tracker, like I said, there's 35 preset views, so you can see some of them here, and then there's 28 more, and some of them are just yearly roundups of your reading, and I'll show you what I mean. And then there's a few charts as well. If you have a Notion Plus paid account, then you can access the charts. But if you have just a regular free Notion account, then the charts won't work for you. So just keep that in mind. However, all the other views will work for you even if you have a free account. And what I've done for this database is give you a little summary or description of each view in these little black info boxes. So if you ever don't understand what a view is, you can just hover over it here or even over here, and it'll give you that little summary. The same thing applies for all of the properties in the tracker as well. So if you just hover over the I symbol, the info symbol, it'll show you the little description. So let's dive into a specific book page, and I'll show you all of the different categories of properties and how they work. And then I'll show you all of the preset views. So to open any book page, you just have to go to the title property, and then there should be a little thing that says open in side peek or just open. You can click that and then it'll just open on the side here. So for each book, I have 4 properties that are kind of pinned at the top near the title. So the first one is the author. And again, this is linked to the author database. So if I just click on this and click again, it'll take me to the author page in the author database. And this has its own series of properties that I will go through in a second, but let's go back to the book page. So after the author, we have the status, which is essentially where you track, where you are with the book. So is it on your TBR? Is it on hold at the library? Are you currently reading it? Did you DNF it? Did you finish reading it? I also have an option here for if you were in the middle of a book and then it was due back to the library and you had to return it before you could finish it, so that you can kind of remember, oh yeah, I didn't get to finish that because I had to return it, and maybe I'll get back to it at some other point. And then I've also got a status option for expired ARC. If you're a reviewer and you typically get eARCs, then you may know that eARCs tend to expire around the pub date of the book. So it also gives you a sense, if you're in the middle of reading it, but then you didn't get to finishing it before it expired, then you can log that here, and then maybe change the status when you get some other copy to read from. Next, I have type, which just essentially tells you if this is a fiction, nonfiction, and then if it's from a different age category. These are mutually exclusive options just to keep things clean. And I personally just feel like I don't really want to be comparing like my adult books with my YAs or my middle grades. And then the next really important property for me was the own property. So this just tells you what format you own the book in, whether that's a physical, an ebook, an audiobook, or an ARC. These are not mutually exclusive options. You can put in multiple. And one thing I will say when it comes to the physical option, there is a later property where you can specify what format of the physical copy you have, whether that's hardcover, paperback, etc. Now, one thing I'll say before I go further into the, book page is that if you don't like the properties that are pinned up here, you can actually change that. So if you go up here and hover, there's this thing that says customize layout. And essentially, if you click on this top thing, you can unpin any property that you want, and you can also pin any other property that you want. There's a maximum of 4 you can pin at the top, so you just have to swap them out. And the same thing goes for any of the later properties. You can actually change the order of these groupings or of these specific properties, or you can even change them on the page itself when it comes to just changing the order within the same group. So that's also an option. Again, this template is very customizable. You can right click any property at any point and rename it if you want to, if you don't like the name that I gave it, or if it doesn't make sense to you. So there's always an option, just keep that in mind. Okay, let's go through all of the groups of properties here. So over here we have the cover. You can add multiple covers if you want to, if it has multiple editions, or if you want to track the UK cover and the North American cover. And then the first group of properties that we have here is the reading data. So this is the data that's related to your reading of the book. So whether that's the method that you use to read the book the first time you read it, so that could be any format from the library or any format that you owned or any format of an ARC. This is different from the own category because you may have read the book from the library, but you later acquired the hardcover or paperback for your own collection. Next, I have a couple pretty straightforward properties. So that's the date you started and the date you finished reading. And then for those of you who reread things a lot, there's also these reread complete dates. So this would just be the date that you finished your reread. And I also have a second reread complete date. If you wanted to add more, you can just duplicate these properties and then adjust. One thing I'll say on these properties is just that you should always fill out the date finished property if you can, even if it's in the ballpark of the month you finished it or the year you finished it, just so that it rolls up in the views where you have your yearly reading, and so you can track how many books you read that year. Next, we have the review properties. So this is just essentially your star rating. There are half stars, and then your verdict, which is something I like to do because I feel like the star ratings don't capture the full nuance of how I feel about a book. So typically I will choose one of these options to go along with the star rating, because sometimes a 5-star read might be a new favorite, or it might be a life-changing read, or it might just be an important read, or it might be a nostalgia fave, so one of my old favorite books from when I was a kid. Again, this is customizable. You can edit any of these options and change them and do whatever you want or reorder them. I just have the ones that I use, but feel free to change them however you want. And you can also delete any ones that you don't like as well. And then the next 2 properties are just the 1-sentence review, pretty self-explanatory, and then a short description if you want to, in your own words, sort of describe the book and give yourself a really nice at-a-glance view of what the book is about. Under TBR, I just have 2 properties. So this is a automation that I've set up. So essentially, if you set your TBR priority to any of these, categories, the TBR month property will automatically populate. So if I select this month, the TBR month will populate with today's date so that it's within this month. You can optionally set this to the end of that month if you wanted to, but it's just so that when you go under the TBR views, it is, clumped together with the other books from that month. This is also really nice for when you want to reschedule things in your TBR. So if you're coming to the end of the month and then you realize that no, you won't get to this book and that you'll probably need to push it to next month, then you can just swap your priority, and then this will auto edit in just a second. There you go. The next section is library borrowing. So you can put in your library due date, the specific library that you borrowed from if you have multiple accounts from different libraries. And then I also have a property for when you're expecting the library hold to come in. So if you put it on hold and you're waiting for it. And then I've got this little checkbox that says returned. So this is a really important property because essentially, say I had set this to like a certain date and I had borrowed it from a certain library. If I return the book, I don't want this due date still looming over me. So if I check off the returned property, then it'll automatically clear those two properties so that I'm on a fresh slate. Alrighty, wish list. So here you can put in which format you have on your wish list. So do you want to get the hardcover or the paperback or the ebook or the audiobook? Whatever it is. So you can put that in, you can put in multiple if you want to, and this will feed into a full wish list view on the tracker. And then you also have a space to put prices. So here you can only see the hardcover price, but actually if you just hit more properties, there is a section for each type of format, just so that it keeps it clean and separate. And in case you like want both the hardcover and the paperback, you can track the price of both. And then finally, it also has a section for a buy link. Another use for the price properties is just to track how much you spent on a book. So if you want to track like how much you spent on the hardcover when you bought it, you can also put that here. Under recommendations, you have two properties. And so this is the recommended from. So this is essentially like the platform or like grouping of people that you got this recommendation from. So say it's like Bookstagram, BookTok, BookTube, family, or friend. And then under this next property, you can actually track the specific like person. I've split these out just so that if you want to do roll-ups of like a specific person's recommendations, you can do that, or you can do roll-ups of a specific platform. So like you can compare your BookTok recommendations to your BookTube recommendations and see which one fits your taste better. Under publishing data, I have some basic stats. So just the pub date, which is the first pub date for the book. So if I was tracking like a classic, I would actually put in the like first published date from like say the 1800s, because this gives you a context around when the book was written or published. And it also helps you kind of prioritize books that were like published in recent years. Like if you want to get to more of the new releases, you can do that, or you can, get to more of the backlist books that you want to read. And then I've got a drop down for the publishers. There's a lot. There's also like parent companies and then smaller imprints. So just keep that in mind. You might want to like track both, or you might just want to simplify some of these options. That's up to you. And then I've got a property for format, which is not like the physical format, but how the book is like portraying the story. So is it through a series of short stories? Is it like a collection? Is it a novel? Is it essays? Is it a novella, poetry, a play? Is it a memoir? Is it a graphic novel, etc.? This just gives you context around like the book. And if you're someone who like doesn't particularly like short story collections, then you can avoid them. Or if you do like short story collections, you can track that and make sure that you're picking them up. And then here I just have a place to put an info link. So if you do still want to put in like the Goodreads link or a Storygraph link, you can do that here, or you can just use one of the buy links even, or you could use the publisher website link. Now under here, I also have these 4 properties that are usually hidden, but you can unhide them. So this one is forward or introduction by. So this is where you would tag in a person who has written a forward or introduction for the book that you're on. And then following that, I have a property for contributors. So say this is like a anthology of short stories where each short story is by a different person. Rather than putting them in the author category, you would actually put them under contributors, and you can tag multiple authors here. And then after that, I have editors. So sometimes a anthology or collection will have edited by this person or, these 2 people. So you can tag them here. And then I've got a property for artists. So if this is like a graphic novel or a manga or a picture book or something with illustrations in it, you can tag the artist as well. But usually you don't really need those properties, so that's why they're hidden, but feel free to unhide them whenever you need. I will get to where you can put a translator later. And then I've got all the property groups for like genres and categories. So for fiction, you can track genres and subgenres. I used to have this as mutually exclusive options, but you can tag multiple things if you feel like it straddles multiple genres. But I would try to refrain from doing that and try to keep it to like one, especially for genre. For subgenre, there's like multiple things. But yeah, like in the case of say, a romance, it could be a classic romance, it could be a, historical romance, it could be a literary, it could be a contemporary, it could be cozy, it could be, a gothic romance. And then same thing goes for fiction. So the subgenres kind of elaborate on the very broad genres. There is another property later on where you can tag in other topics, so I'll show you that. But after fiction, we have the nonfiction categories. So these are exclusive to nonfiction. Try not to fill these out for fiction books. But under category, there's like all these broad, topics. Under subcategory, there's more like specific things for each one. You can add as many subcategories here as you want, and same with the categories. You might want to change them up or name them something different if you prefer. And yeah, that's pretty flexible. I have this group of properties where you can actually add tags. So if the book deals with climate, you can put climate. If it has a coffee shop in it, you can put a coffee shop. If it's a book that's set over like Christmas, or if it has like Christmassy vibes, you can put in Christmas. And you can tag multiple things here. So in the case of Diary of Blood, it has vampires, so I can put in vampires. Now after tags, I also have a property for representation. So this is essentially like, does it have mental illness rep? Does it have autism rep? Does it have like a certain queer rep? You can add as many options as you want here. This is different from tracking like the author's own identities. This is really only related to the content of the book. So in the case of like Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Malors, that one has like addiction rep, so I would put addiction. And it also has like depression rep, so I would put in depression. After that, I have a property called retelling/inspired by. This is where you can track books that are retellings and like what they're a retelling of, or if they're like vaguely inspired by something, you can put that here too. So in the case of Diary of Blood, it is a, retelling of Dracula and from the perspective of one of his brides. So I put in Dracula here. And then after that, you can also track if there are other books that are pretty similar to this one. You can actually tag them from the rest of the tracker, and then it'll create a relation between them so that even when you're on that book's page, you can refer back to this book. This comes in really handy if you're like trying to recommend books to other people, or if you're trying to find a new read that feels similar. Another way you could use this is that if you see a description of a book online and then you see that it compares it to a specific book, you could tag that book here so that later when you decide to like actually read the book, or if you're deciding between, this book and another book of what you want to read, then you can base it off of what it's similar to. And then I've got another property for just similar media. So this could be like TV shows, movies, podcasts, whatever it is. And this is just a written property, so you would just write those in. And then I've got one more property, which is hidden and which you can like unhide if you want to, and that is content warnings. So these are just content warnings, trigger warnings. If you're someone who cares to track that stuff, you can track it in here. I honestly think they're really important, so that's why I included it here, so you can add those in. And then if you hear someone talk about like content warnings, you can like plug them in when you're tracking the book. Okay, we're halfway there. Next, I have translation details. So if this is a translated book, you can just check off translated, and then you can also track the specific language it was translated from. And then here you can also tag the translator. After that, I have romance details. So this is really fun because you can track like specific romance tropes, which is really fun, and you can tag multiple. And then you can also put in a spice level rating. So I've got chili peppers out of 5. You can also just put in no spice. And then I've also got an option that says not applicable, which is essentially just to use for like, I don't know, YA romances where I think it's really inappropriate to be talking about spice, to be honest, because they're teenagers. But you can use that however you want. If you really feel like you always want to fill out this property, then you can, attribute the not applicable to like books that don't even have a romance. And then there's one more property here, which is relationships. So if you want to track if this is like a, male-male romance or like a sapphic romance, or if it's like, got a polyamorous situation, you can track that. If it's undefined genders, but there's, romance going on, you can put that in. You can edit and change these however you want. If you don't like using the acronyms, you can also edit that to be something different. I just based this off of like some categories that I found online about what romance readers track, and honestly, I don't really track this all that often. All right, and then I've got a really exciting set of properties, which is series data. So here you can track everything related to this book being in a series. So if it's in a consecutive series where you have to like read the first book to get to the next book, you can put that in. If it's a companion series where like they're set in the same world, but like they're not directly related to each other, you can use companion series. And then you can also tag in the series title, and this helps like categorize them in the series view, which I will show you. So that's really important to add in. Even if it's just like the name of the first book, you can always edit this later. So in this case, A Sky Beyond the Storm, which is the 4th book of the Ember and the Ashes series. So it's a consecutive series, Ember and the Ashes series. It's position number 4. And then here under books and series, you can tag the other books in the series essentially. And then this way you can easily access the other books in the series. And then this series total in library property will automatically calculate how many books you have tagged here under books and series. And that just gives you the number of books that you have in the whole library that correspond to the series. And the reason for doing that is just so that you can track your series progress. So for each book within this property that I mark complete, it'll update the progress by dividing it out of, the total number. So say I marked this as TBR now, this progress will change to 75% because now it assumes that I've only read 3 of them. Super fun, really nice to just check where you are with the series, and then also just make sure that you're like tagging follow-ups, or if you hear that a book is like getting a series, then you can just like quickly add it here. Even though you haven't added any info about it, you can just like tag it here as like a new page if you wanted to, like create a page. Next we have gifting. So this is where you can track if someone gifted the book to you. So was it the publisher? If you're a reviewer, was it a family member or friend? You can put in specific names here as well if you wanted to. And then you can also track if you gifted this book to someone else. So did you gift it to your mom or your partner or your friend? After that, I have eARC, which if you're a reviewer, you can track if you have the eARC, which is the advanced reading copy, which is essentially something that publishers give reviewers so that they can read the book ahead of time and give a review on it and build some buzz around it. So if you are a reviewer and you receive eARCs, then you can track what format that eARC is in. If it's an eARC, you can also track when it expires. And then we get into all of the like actual collection copies. So if you own a physical copy, you can track all of these different properties. So you can track what formats you own it in. The physical page count, you don't necessarily need to own the book to track this. Like even if you have the library book, you could put this in if you wanted to. And this actually relates to a property that I forgot to explain, but that's the current page and progress properties up here, where you can put in like, say if I was on like page 50 of this book, this progress property will calculate how far into the book I am based off of the physical page count. Again, this only applies to the physical book or physical copy, because if it's like an ebook or an audiobook, like whatever app you're, reading it on will tell you your progress, so you don't really need it. So if you're someone who reads a lot on physical, this is helpful, but you can also delete those properties if you don't think you'll use them. And then after that, you can put in the date you purchased the physical copy. You can put in what bookstore you got it from. It's a drop down, so you can add more options. And if you unhauled the book, which means like if you got rid of whatever copy, whether you gifted it to someone, donated it, sold it, whatever, you can track what copies you unhauled. And the nice thing about this is that it comes with an automation that I created. So say I unhauled the hardcover. I used to own it, but I unhauled it. I click unhauled hardcover, and then this property will actually update to remove the hardcover from it. Yeah, there you go. Now you unhauled it, but you no longer own it. And then I've got a property to track the ISBN. So the way I've set this up is that it's like copy 1, copy 2, copy 3. So the first copy that you own, you can put in the ISBN. If you own another copy, you put in the ISBN here. I didn't attribute these to a specific format only because I feel like it's not really relevant for everyone. However, you could rename these to like hardcover ISBN, and then, paperback ISBN, special edition ISBN, whatever it is. Honestly, I don't really care to track the ISBNs all that much, but sometimes it's useful. Okay, after physical copy, I have eBook copy. So this is where you can track what app you own the ebook on, or like system. But for me, I own like multiple book reading apps. So I feel like I'm always getting confused on which app I own a book on. So that's why I have this property here, but it might not be applicable to you if you don't read ebooks at all, or if you only read them on your Kindle. And then next I've got a property for the ebook page count. You don't necessarily have to fill this in, but if you want to, you can. And then similar to the physical copy, I've got like a date purchased for ebook and the ebook ISBN. For audiobook, it's pretty much the same thing. Like what app do you own the audiobook on? You can also track the audiobook narrator here. Okay, and then here you can put the audiobook length by hours. So say it's like 7 hours and 30 minutes, I would put 7.5. Not 7 hours and 30 minutes, because this is a number property. And then again, I have like purchase date and then ISBN. All right, these next groups of categories are really fun. So I've got one for setting, so you can track where this book is set in terms of the continent. You can track what country it's set in, and again, you can add as many options as you want or need, and you can track like the region. This could be like a province or a territory or like a part of a country. You can track the city it's set in, and again, for all of these, you can track multiple if it's like across multiple locations. And then you can also track the era that the book is set in, whether that's like a specific decade or century or like historical period or empire, whatever it is, you can track that. These properties are really fun to me because then you can track like how broad your reading is, or if you're only reading in certain settings, and it just helps you like be more conscious of the reading that you're doing and try to diversify. And then under writing, we have like things related to the writing style of the book. So how many POVs does it have? Is it a single, dual? Is there multiple point of views? Is the perspective from first person, second person, or third person? Or you can, tag multiple. What tense is it written in? Is it written in past tense, present tense, or future tense? And then you can also track like the tone of the writing, whether that's like comedic or satirical or sad or kind of surreal. These are just options that I've put in, but you can add or edit these or remove whatever you want and just make them make sense for you. Again, these are just like extra fun details to track and kind of helps you hone in on your reading taste and like what you really love about the books that you love. So yeah. Okay, and then I've got these 2 sections here, so author details. So this is just like a single property that rolls up from the actual author database. So here it says like author race, South Asian, this is Sabat here. But if I actually click on her page within the author database, I'll just go through this really quickly, but it shows you the pronunciation, it shows you like their credited works, whether that's like the books they authored or their series or quotes, whatever it is. And then, if they were an artist or they did a forward or edited a collection, whatever. But under here on details, we have more demographics and like details about the person themselves. So what's their pronouns, what's their race, and there's multiple options here, what's their nationality, what's their ethnicity, and then if they're queer, what identity do they have, or is it just like that they're queer but they don't have a specific label? Are they religious? Do they practice a specific religion? Do they have a disability? Are they neurospicy? As in, are they neurodivergent? Do they have some sort of like psychiatric condition, whatever it is? So these are all details that I think are nice to track for your own personal reasons. And I would caution everyone to be very careful about how you use these and only track things that are like things that the authors have openly spoken about, and don't use this as like the gospel or word of God, because I wouldn't want the case where like you're tracking that someone is like not queer and then demanding answers for whether they are queer and forcibly outing someone. But really, rather than cataloging authors, this is really to just push you to understand how many of the authors that you're reading are like, say, white authors or authors of color, and really strive towards making that more equal. I'll talk about this when I get to the author database a little bit more, but as I was saying, yeah, there's all these details, and on the book page it just rolls up the race in specific just so that you're reading from more authors of color. You could also roll up the queer identity property if you wanted to make sure that you're reading more queer authors, whatever it is. If you're trying to read from like a specific ethnicity because like say you come from that background, then you could also add that as the alternative roll up. You could also like just edit this one to like change it to a different property here as well. Okay, and then finally we have quotes, and I don't have any here, but let me go to an example that does have quotes on it. So this is Academy for Liars by Alexis Henderson, and here are all the quotes that I've added in that are attributed to this book. And then if you actually go to Alexis Henderson's page, you'll also see the quotes that she's authored in a list here under quotes. Super fun, and I'll show you more about the quotes in a second. But that is essentially the book pages. So those properties, and there's a lot of them, as I said, feed into all of the views that you have here. And honestly, these are pretty straightforward, so I won't say much about each, but here is the full database where you can like search through your full database. It is in alphabetical order. You can change that, and you can load as many entries as you want. It loads 10 to start, and then you can load more. You have your 2025 reading goals. These are the books that you finished and read in 2025. And then if you want to track books that you read in previous years, they'll go under these other views. You've got your TBR based off of like the, priority in the month that you set. I've got a cover gallery view that's grouped by like category just for funsies. I've got a currently reading tab, and this doesn't really apply if you don't usually read multiple books at once, so feel free to hide it or delete it if you don't do that. And then under borrowed, you can track the books that you borrowed from the library, their due dates, where you borrowed them from, their different formats. Again, this is going to start feeling repetitive because I've already gone through the properties, but yeah, this view is the finished view. So you can see all the books that you've marked finished. You can see them by their star rating. If I go to Wishlist, I can see all the books on my wish list, including their links and their prices. Under recommendations, I can see any book that I've tagged with some sort of recommendation tag. And then if you wanted to, you could filter by a specific option as well. If I go to series, I can see, all of the series in my database and their progress. And if I wanted to, I could filter or just search for a specific series. Okay, and then I've got upcoming releases, and I really like this view because it essentially just gives you the work week, Monday to Friday, and shows you all of the books that come out that week. If you're not familiar with publishing, books only come out on Tuesdays. That's the standard release date. They only are allowed to come out on Tuesdays. It's something about tracking of sales and whatever. That's why I've just kind of changed it into this week view, and you can toggle between the weeks. If you want to view this by the month, you can just edit this to change the layout to show by month instead. And then I've got the setting view, which just shows you all of the books under a specific continent, and you can change that to group by country if you wanted to. And then I've got all the books that you own, and these are grouped by their format type, and you can toggle those open and closed. But you also have specific views for your physical collection by their format, and you also have your ebooks that you own, and this is by their status. But you could also change this to by the app that you own, so which books you have on your Kindle versus your Kobo, that kind of thing. And same goes for audiobooks. It's organized by TBR or status, but you could switch that to by the app that you own it on. I've also got a view for the different translated books in your collection. It shows you, the original language and the translator, and you can also toggle these by the language. So if you feel like reading a Korean translated fiction, you could go to those. Under story details, this is where you can add in extra details in one view in bulk for multiple books, which I think is really helpful. And you can filter this or search for a specific book or author and then fill it in that way. I've also got a romance view, which just shows you all of the books that you've tagged with some sort of spice rating, and then you can go through and find a book like that. I've also got an ARC view if you're a reviewer, so it shows you what type of ARC and when it expires, if it's an eARC, and what publisher it's from, and the genre as well. And then I've just got some basic views of the fiction books that you own, nonfiction, young adult, and middle grade. And then if you have Notion Plus, which allows charts, you can also track how many books you've read by month with this view, and it'll also group it by the genres. So you can see how much of each genre you read each month. And then same thing, if you have Notion Plus, you can also see this view where you can see your book buying by each month. And then finally, I have this chart again for Notion Plus users where you can see your database by genre. And this just shows you a pie chart or circle chart of the total books in your entire database, and then what genre each of them are in. Keep in mind that nonfiction books would not have a genre. So if you wanted to change this to the category or type so that you see fiction versus nonfiction and young adult, you can do that too. Finally, the last view that we have here is the edit view, which essentially shows you basically all of the properties or most properties. So you can do bulk edits, and you can also select all, and then if I want to change the publisher for all of them to say 1804 books, I could do that. And that is basically the ultimate book tracker, which is so awesome. And again, it's preloaded with 500 plus books and over 300 authors from the author database. So it's a pretty sweet deal. So let me scroll down to the author database. There's a few different views. There's just the all authors with all the properties available. There's the details view, which shows you the pronouns and the race and all of that, and which you can use to do bulk edits on authors. And then I've got a bunch of charts for if you have a Notion Plus account. So I've got authors by race, which just shows you all of the authors that you've filled out, some sort of race for, and then you can see the percentage of each. So in the database right now, there's 33% white authors, 17% East Asian, 15% Black, 12% South Asian, 8.6% Arab, 3.4% Southeast Asian, 2.7% Indigenous, and so on. Obviously, these percentages could be improved. So yeah, hopefully you can, add more diverse books into this collection. I've also got a pie chart for authors by nationality. Obviously, North American authors dominate because, I live in North America, so I'm reading a lot of North American published books, but maybe that might be different for you. And one thing to note is that this chart only shows the author pages where you've actually filled out this property. And then finally, this is just a table view of all of the authors of color in your database. So essentially any authors that are not white. All right, and then after the author database, we have the quote tracker, like I showed you before. So there's two views here. There's the quote gallery, which just shows them in like these sort of card formats that I think are really cute. But you can also look at them in the library, table version, which just gives you the full quote on the side, the book, and then all the other details related to that. For the quotes, each of them is their own page, and you can, attribute the book and the author. If you attribute the book, it'll automatically fill in the author. And you can also track the date you added the quote to your database, or the date that you read it if you wanted to. And then I've got a little property for the type of quote. So I've got bookish, beautiful, inspiring, educational, relatable. And this way you can filter through certain types of quotes. So if you're looking for all of the relatable quotes that you've, logged recently, you could do that. I've also got a property for page number if you want to track what page the quote was on, if you have the physical or maybe even the ebook. And then I've got a property for the character. So if this quote was said by a specific character and you wanted to track that, you could just write in their name. So I think for this one from 7 Days in June, it was by the character Shane, and it goes, I idealize you in fiction because I idealized you in real life. Beautiful quote. And then finally, you can also tag similar quotes from the quote tracker database if you feel like it. Okay, and then I've got the reading goals tracker, like I showed you before. This one has two different views, so it's split up by the type of goal. So I've got the 2025 reading goals, which are essentially number-based goals where you have to read a specific number of books that fit a specific criteria to be hitting that goal. So in this example, it says read at least 50 books by authors of color. So I would put in the goal number, which is 50. And then over here in books fulfilling, I would tag in all the books that apply to this goal. This way the tracker will count how many books are in this property and then put it in the progress bar that is calculating against your goal. And you can put in a deadline and if this is a year goal or a month goal or a quarter goal, and you can filter by that if you wanted to. All right, and then the other view here shows you your softer bookish goals. So these are just essentially any goals that don't have you have to read a certain number of books related to it. So it might be something like attend a book club meeting or go to a book signing. These are just goals or bucket list items that you just check off, and you can write little notes about what you did or how you're going to achieve that goal, and you can put in deadlines for them as well. Okay, and then finally we have our daily pages read log. I've been talking for ages, so we're at the end. This is again that database where you can track how many pages you've read each day, and the point of this tracker is just to get you to read on a regular basis, whether that's daily. It might not be daily, it might be every other day or every week, but regardless, you would track how many pages you read as a form of motivation. And the tracker is set up so that your progress bar for each day is out of 100 pages. That is a lot. You can always edit this property to be out of 50. It'll calculate based off of that. I personally want to try to read 100 books each day. That's a lot for me. That's at least 2 hours of reading because I am unfortunately a very slow reader, but I do want to try to make more time for it, whether that's right before bed or in the morning. I might change it to 75 pages. We'll see. But when you're logging in this tracker, it'll populate the date as today. You tag the book that you read from and it'll automatically tag the author, and then you would just put in the page you started on and then the page that you ended on, and it'll automatically calculate your progress. And then at the end of a month or a year, you could see the sum of pages that you've read, but keep in mind that you have to log every time you read for it to calculate the right amount, but still it's a nice little motivational thing. And with that is the ultimate personal library database by me, Jenny from The Story Ain't Over, made for all of you and me to track our reading in the most neurotic and obsessive way ever. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Even if you're not grabbing the tracker, hopefully this was like interesting to you in terms of like how I track my reading. And also for those of you who are like really good with Notion, you could probably build this yourself in some capacity. It's up to you. But if you don't want to go through the many hours of effort that I went through, feel free to go grab it on my Etsy store. And again, it comes preloaded with over 500 books that you kind of saw in this database today. Pretty sweet deal, and it's a great way to support me and my channel. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. And please remember that this story ain't over. Bye.